Well, good morning and welcome to our April virtual town hall. So I apologize, we had some technical difficulties at the start of the hour. So I was telling you about what we're going to do, technical difficulties, and you couldn't hear me. So I apologize for that, but we are back live and hopefully audio is working now and we will get on with our program. So again, thank you for joining us, our April virtual town hall. So it's been more than a month or so since we saw you last. And I remind you every month that as long as this meeting is providing value to you, we'll continue to host them. So at the start of the show, we had more than 400 of you in attendance today, so hopefully folks are rejoining the meeting here as we get back going again. My name is Chris Valentine. I'll be your moderator for today's program. So I'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to do this morning. So we heard from you that the town halls over the winter were getting a little bit repetitive, so we changed up the format just a bit this month. In addition to our panelists and our question and answer that we'll do later in the show, and our campus update from the Chancellor, we're honored to have two guests this month. Our two newest CU Distinguished Professors. We'll have a few minutes for a short Q&A with them, so if you have questions, please submit them in the link at the bottom of your screen. After the Distinguished Professor's presentation, Chancellor Reddy will provide a short campus update, and then we'll open it up to our question and answer from our panelists. Our panelists today are Provost Tom Christensen, Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Chuck Litchfield, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Carlos Garcia, and Assistant Vice Chancellor for Health and Wellness, Stephanie Hannenberg. If you're tuning in this morning and have questions for our panel, we encourage you again to submit your questions through the link at the bottom of the screen. We'll address as many of them as time permits. The town hall is scheduled for an hour, but since we started a little bit late, we may be able to go a few minutes longer to get everyone's questions in as we can. As always, we'll include a summary and answers to the frequently asked questions in tomorrow's communique. We hopefully no more technical challenges, but if we do have any technical challenges, we'll do our best to get back online as quickly as possible, as we just did. So. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Venkat Reddy to introduce our distinguished professors. Chancellor?
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me for our virtual April Town Hall. I'm very pleased to kick off this month's Town Hall with two very special guests, our new distinguished professors, Dr. Robert Juan Dassanowsky and Dr. Terry Boult. A warm welcome to another special guest, Regent Sue Sharkey, who's joining us today. First, I want to give you a little perspective on how great an honor it is to be receiving the Distinguished Professor Award. The title, Distinguished Professor, is the highest honor that the University of Colorado bestows on its faculty members. It recognizes the outstanding contributions that tenured faculty members have made to the university and to their academic discipline as a whole. We are proud to now have 7 distinguished professors at UCCS. As the Board of Regents granted the title to Dr. Robert Juan Dassanowsky and Dr. Terry Boult earlier this academic year. We are very excited to celebrate their incredible achievements today. Allow me to first share a few words about Dr. Dassanowsky, now a distinguished professor of both film studies and languages and cultures. It's hard to pick just one thing to celebrate about Robert's work at UCCS. Largely because he holds tenure in not just one department, but 2. On the one hand, Robert is one of the world's top scholars in Austrian studies and an internationally recognized expert in Central European culture. On the other hand, he's also the founder of our film studies program. For nearly 30 years, he has set our students up for a lifetime of success. The graduates of the film studies program have their pick of the top filmmaking programs in the world, thanks to the incredible education they received before stepping behind a camera. It would be truly difficult to sum up Dr. Dassanowsky's accomplishments, which include a deep history of scholarship, sponsored research, grants, and awards. Instead, I'm pleased to welcome distinguished professor, Dr. Robert Juan Dassanowsky himself, to say a few words.
Thank you, Chancellor Reddy. What an introduction. Thank you also, Provost Christensen, Vice Chancellors, Deans, and esteemed colleagues. Words can express the gratitude I feel for this sublime honor. I promote it every day with every word in every lecture or integrated in my research and my mentoring. CU, and specifically UCCS, has continuously given me a freedom of inquiry and an open vista of interpretation that since my graduate years at UCLA and abroad, I have never found in any other institution. There are gives and takes, but I'm aware that film and cultural criticism and its history has both an unusual breadth and a tightly focused specificity located at the intersection, or my intersection, of Central European culture, cinema, history, politics, documentation, digital humanities, and several more pathways at the horizon, which UCCS encouraged, and not all, but enough said, run with it. So I did. Open a line of inquiry on the specifically transcultural Austrian cinema and its forgotten history with Hollywood, and as the cinemother of international roster of artists and concepts that have altered the global cinematic vision. This ranges from one of the earliest female silent film pioneers to a contemporary landscape of female filmmakers that in the past 20 years have created one of the most critically insightful cinemas, and their personal interest in my writing of their history in the making. The outcome of such freely given connections resulted in a greater research treasure, which came from more than a decade of archival research on 2 continents. The power of film to change history or to lose it, as I documented Hollywood's attempt to derail Hitler's plans of Austrian and Czechoslovakian annexation through shared co-production, which only greed ultimately managed to crush in 1937. This has led me and brilliant colleagues in developing Danube studies into a growing field, which I hope to root at UCCS as well in languages and cultures. Film studies was not at all the exciting and the well-turned-out Isle of student creation, study, and successful futures it is today. More than 20 years ago, when seemingly no one was looking, I began with 2 TV monitors and a couple of video cassettes. And students piled on one another on chairs and rugs in spaces which no longer even exist on our campus. Enchanted and enlightened, they were, as this in the 20th Student Short Film Festival is only a couple of weeks at the End Center with pride and success of the first students that founded it, eating from giant bags of popcorn and not dreaming, but living the hope of an audience, which has come to many of them since. The answer was not always yes, follow that thought, but there were enough, and that was all that mattered. My dear colleagues, that said, simply, this is your lab. Your affronts against the silence or the disinterest are encouraged. It is a light remarkable. To this then, CU and UCCS, I dedicate my work as a scholar, teacher, a public educator, a writer, producer, and the most fulfilling, surely, of all, a mentor. Because of this important gift you have given me, there will be many more intersections possible. And among the many colleagues at the CU campuses, I need to thank some other academics, some other extinguished professors, such as I am now, at Texas University at Austin, at Yale University, University of Salzburg and Vienna, at the European Academy of Science and Arts. I wish to specifically thank those who gave their unwavering support at UCCS, for UCCS, and for me. Susan McCauley, former chair of VAPA, the distinguished professors of our campus, and the current chair of VAPA, Teresa Meadows, as well as Professor Rex Welshon. As it stands now, diversity and inclusion are the modes of our future. And that means more connection, more interaction, less masks, and more discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. A huge congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. And thank you for all the hard work you've done to put us on the map.
Thank you.
I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Terry Boult, L. Pomar Endowed Chair of Innovation and Security, and now a distinguished professor of computer science. Terry is the founder of the Bachelor of Innovation degree and a pioneer in not just one, but multiple research fields. I had the honor of serving as the Dean of the College of Business when the program was launched in collaboration with the College of Engineering and Applied Science. Something you may not know is that you might have benefited from Terry's research without even knowing it. His early research is still used in MRI machines throughout the world, and his work in visual surveillance and long-range imaging is used globally by cruise lines and military bases. We are proud to say that Dr. Boult is one of the top minds in the world in the field of computer security. He has 14 patents to his name, with more pending, and he has received more than $15 million in research funding. Most importantly, Terry's incredible mentorship has set countless students on a path to success. I'm very pleased that Dr. Boult himself will now say a few words.
Thank you, Venkat, and thank the administration, regents, and presidents for the award of Distinguished Professor, and the L. Pomar Foundation that established a chair that I've held since joining UCCS in 2003. There's no way to do the kind of research I do without having great teams, and so I also have to thank my many great students and collaborators, both across campus and at many other schools. And I want to thank my wife, Ginger, without whom my life would be empty and without whom I would not be near as successful, let alone being distinguished. Becoming a distinguished professor literally is the culmination of my lifelong dream. When I was in 6th grade, I started working as a teacher's aide for the first time, and I decided that I wanted to be a professor. I've loved teaching ever since, and I've been doing teaching ever since. In middle school and high school, I lived on a small farm, and I didn't have a lot of mentorship, as neither of my parents had gone to a 4-year college. My father was so against me going to college that not only did he refuse to help financially, he wouldn't even drive me to college. My mom had to drive me on her own. So I was not at the top of my class, and in college, I later learned that I had undiagnosed dyslexia, so I had to work really hard. And I got into Columbia, paid my way through with no financial support from my family, paying more back in 1979 than what UCCS costs students today. So I feel a real connection to many of our struggles of our students. When I was an undergrad, I got a chance to get involved in computer science research as and it really changed my direction for grad school. Originally, I was going to study physics. And I knew I was going to love being a CS professor. Nothing could be better than a career doing a combination of research and teaching. I spent 8 years on the faculty at Columbia, and along the way, I realized that I cared a lot more about my research having an impact than I did about the standard academic accolades. Research is the transformation of money into knowledge, but I wanted to transform ideas into impact. I started joint projects with industry that led to the MRI technology Venkat mentioned. Then I started working in startups because I wanted to take the technology I was developing in my research lab and actually getting it out in the world. And you just hope that if you publish papers, it'll make a difference. You're not going to be near as impactful as if you get out there and actually work with the companies to make it happen. I was doing well at Lehigh, but the administrator there was not as supportive of my educational objectives. So in 2003, I actually did a nationwide search, and I joined UCCS because it's a place I could have my desired impact. Most of my professional friends thought I was crazy moving to a school that wasn't even an R2 at the time, wondering how I could do my research. But innovation, which I define as a transformation of ideas into impact, is what had become my passion. And I felt I could really do good research anywhere, but UCCS was going to be a good place or a great place to launch my educational passion and help transforming research mission and help transform the research mission too. With many first-generation college students, I felt UCS was really a great place for me to do what I want to do. So after a few years, I pitched the Bachelor of Innovation Family of Degrees, which has now grown to serve more than 600 plus students across 22 majors, spanning across 4 colleges. Despite the large teaching demands of that, I was still able to keep my research and continue focusing on having impact. My most cited and most impactful research work I've done has been the work I did here with students at UCCS. I was at Columbia, I was at Lehigh, top tier schools, and I did good research there. But I've had more impact here. I had more money there, but I've had more impact with my research here. The work I've been doing on privacy-enhanced biometrics that works to try and balance the government's need to identify people with the goals of also trying to protect your privacy is now in international standards and used by commercial companies. My ongoing research work in open set recognition is really about how to make machines that can actually meaningfully say, I don't know, instead of saying, here's the best answer I can give you, even though it's probably not right. So we're working on that. My research agenda has been very broad, and I've continued to take me in directions that I help other faculty and students with their passions. When I'm asked how I'm able to be successful in funded research and get both the level of publications and the funding I have, my answer has always been pretty simple. Don't focus on finding funding for what you want to do. Find a problem find someone that has an important problem, that is looking to have their problem solved, and that problem is of some interest to you. Help them find and build a team and solve it. Focus on impact. And if your work really has an impact, you can find money to do it. If you're focusing on just what's interesting, it's harder to find money. As you do this, it'll almost always mean you need to grow and expand your abilities. Many of my larger DARPA, IARPA, ONR efforts have collaborated across the country. If you find the best people to work with, it's also much easier to build a collaborative but competitive team to solve those big problems. As an example of growing, my largest NSF effort was an outgrowth of work I started here with Dr. Chip Benight on campus. When I saw his work, I thought this is an important direction, and I wanted to help, but I really had no experience in trauma or psychological theories. But I felt this is the direction we want to put some effort into, and so I went and read a book, and we started collaborating, right? And we've had multiple successful grants after that, trying to drive his work forward. He's an exceptional researcher, and I learned a lot by working with him. So it's my growth by helping other people. Similarly, I regularly help local companies go after SBRs and SCTRs to grow their research base, which has produced about 20 million of impact in Colorado beyond the 15 million that I brought to UCCS. So again, by focusing on an impact on helping them, on helping our students, that supported many of our students, but also led to both publications and helping companies. My final tip for having a successful large research effort is to submit lots of proposals and lots of papers and engage your students in both of those processes. I don't recall the exact number, but in my hungriest year, when I was really hurting for money, because if you have a lot of students, you have to keep bringing in lots of money. I think I submitted something like 40 proposals or white papers that 1 year, right? Just to keep my lab running. So it does take a lot of effort, but that effort then grows as you have a large group of students and postdocs to help to get stuff going. So again, I want to thank my wife, my many students and collaborators without whom I would not have been successful. I will be forever indebted to the gifts I have gotten from faculty throughout my career that believed in me and helped launch me on the path of innovation. And I feel the best thing I can do to ever pay them back is to help other students go down that path. I'm proud to be named a distinguished professor and I hope I can continue to grow in the spirit of that title.
Thank you, Dr. Boult. This honor is truly well-deserved. And thank you both for sharing your inspiring stories. You truly are distinguished. And I'm gonna get it back to Chris to see if there are any questions for you both.
So thanks, Chancellor. We actually do have a question from the audience. So it's for Dr. Dassanowsky. The question is simple. What film study courses will we see offered on the horizon? So what are your plans for the future, basically?
Quite a few. This is not something that we ever stop and keep replaying. It's not on a reel, so it grows. Next up is going to be British cinema, and probably in connection with Irish cinema. Women film pioneers, since I was involved with a documentary on Alice Guy Blaché, who was the first filmmaker, not only the first female filmmaker, but the first filmmaker. And some hot topics about things that are going on in cinema today, particularly with the changes dealing with inclusion and gender and the American dream or the American situation.
Thank you so much for that update. We don't have any more questions from our audience, so I want to thank again Dr. Dassanowsky and Dr. Boult for sharing their thoughts with us today. We appreciate both of you. So we're going to transition now to our campus update. So I'll turn it over to Chancellor Reddy for a short campus update. Thanks.
Again, thank you both. We have really had a great pleasure having you both on this town hall today. All right, I have a few updates to share with you all. Let's start off with the hottest topic right now, vaccines. So every Coloradan 16 years or older is now eligible to receive a vaccine, and we are seeing excellent progress statewide. Nearly 50% of the eligible population has received at least one dose of the vaccine. Because of this good progress, we're able to plan for a strong in-person presence beginning with the fall semester. However, there is still progress to be made. Yesterday, Governor Jared Polis stated his support of all Colorado's post-secondary students getting the COVID-19 vaccine for the fall. He said that he expects that most higher education institutions will provide parents and students the peace of mind they want by making vaccines a requirement for next fall. The leadership team between the 4 campuses and the CU system are discussing requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for students, faculty, and staff for the fall semester. We'll announce a decision as soon as possible. If you'd like to get the vaccine but haven't gotten it yet, keep an eye out for opportunities to receive it on campus at the Wellness Center. The vaccine clinic is open to all faculty, staff, and students. And we hope that the state approves our vaccine orders that we request from them. Tuition update. The CU system recently recommended a 3% increase on tuition for the upcoming year. Thanks to the federal relief funds, we'll actually be able to keep tuition for the upcoming year flat. We'll be using the federal funds to buy down the 3% increase. So it's my hope that the effectively 0% tuition increase and new financial support will provide much needed help to our students as they pursue their academic goals. In terms of pay increases, we also have good news for faculty and staff. Classified staff will receive a 3% state mandated increase to their annual salaries starting in July. Faculty and university staff will receive a one-time bonus equal to 2% of their salaries in July as well. The commitment of our faculty and staff have shown in a very difficult environment last year has been inspiring. In many ways, this payment is simply a way of saying thank you. I have one more note on finances. The pay raise cycle for faculty and staff has shifted to a January to December calendar rather than following the fiscal year. This is the calendar we will follow as we consider permanent compensation increases for 2022. We'll be looking closely at fall enrollment and our revenue threshold when we make a compensation recommendation to the Board of Regents next semester. If pay raises are approved, we believe they would be somewhere in the realm of 1 to 3%. Another big one on everyone's mind is return to campus. I know there is another topic. What does our return to campus look like and what would we look like in the long term? So let me address those 2 things. We have learned a lot in the past year and we are committed to bringing those lessons with us into the future. The past year has taught us that meeting virtually can be a successful alternative to on-campus meetings, and there are benefits associated with virtual meetings, such as a greater efficiency of time and resources. In fact, this town hall is a great example. We couldn't have so many of you in one room. But we also learned that connecting in person matters to continue our culture of belonging. Therefore, we are planning thoughtfully for the future of work at UCCS. The Future of Work Task Force, chaired by Carlos Garcia, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, is currently working to evaluate our campus policies and procedures related to our work environment. We expect this work to take a bit of time to complete, and I expect the task force to return their recommendations sometime late summer or early fall. As we wait for those long-term recommendations, we recognize that we need to begin planning for our faculty and staff to return to campus over the summer as we prepare to serve our students during the fall semester. We are working on a short-term plan that will provide guidance for campus managers and supervisors in a number of key areas, such as flexibility in work locations for the fall semester, guidelines for meetings and gatherings, and the needs of permanent and temporary workspaces on campus. Our plan right now is to use the summer months to work through these details with the goal of fully implementing our fall work and return to campus plans on August 2nd. Some departments may transition back to campus sooner, but all campus services should plan to have their on-campus presence open no later than August 2nd to serve our faculty and students as they return to campus for the fall semester. We'll plan to spend more time during our May 12th town hall meeting discussing this transition. Next, as we announced earlier this week, we're extending the search for our new provost. The search committee worked very hard to bring 5 finalists to campus, but unfortunately, 2 of the candidates withdrew before their campus visit because they accepted other positions. 2 of the other finalists were determined to not be a good fit for our campus community, and the 3rd candidate withdrew for personal reasons. I want to be very clear that we are committed to finding the right individual for the job, so we won't rush this process just to say that we filled the position. As I shared, we are continuing the search for the new provost in the fall. I appointed a small committee to identify and recommend interim provost candidate or candidates. Provost Tom Christensen will join the co-chairs of the provost search committee, Dean Don Rayburn and Professor Mary Ann Cutter, to work together on this. So essentially, the new provost search has been extended into the fall semester. And I really appreciate all the committee members for all the hard work they have done and are willing to hang the fall. Final update is a CU Online initiative update. We have signed the service agreement with the CU System Office of Digital Education. We also signed the RN to BSN program term sheet. This will be our first program to be offered this fall on the CU Online portal. Many thanks to Dean Karen Markel and Dean Kevin Lardner for helping make this happen. All right, now I'm going to turn it back to Chris as we move to the Q&A portion of today's town hall.
Thanks, Chancellor, for that update. So we're a little bit halfway through our town hall, so time for the second half of our Q&A. So I'd like to bring our panel online here. So our panel, of course, will include Chancellor Reddy, who you've heard from. He'll stay with us. Carlos Garcia, our Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, will join us. Stephanie Hannenberg, our Assistant Vice Chancellor of Health and Wellness, is with us. Chuck Litchfield, our Vice Chancellor of Administration and Finance, is here. And of course, Provost Tom Christensen is here. We have a couple of pre-submitted questions, and then we'll get to the live questions right after that. So if you have questions for anyone on the panel, please use the link at the bottom of your screen there and drop those in. And again, we'll get to as many as we can in the time allotted. So let's start with Provost Christensen. So Provost, we have a first question for you. With COVID cases creeping up, are we still planning a safe, non-remote fall? So can you talk a little bit about what plans look like for academics in the fall?
Yeah, so at this point, we are still planning to go forward with the way we have currently scheduled classes, which is to have more of the campus more classes on the campus. We are certainly keeping an eye on what's happening to the number of cases, but we're also at the same time seeing the increase in vaccination, and the vaccination rates are going up significantly as well. So at this point, that is the plan. Just a reminder to everyone that students are already registering for the fall semester, and so they are making their choices of classes based on the way we have currently assigned the modes for those classes to be taught in. So, any changes that we want to make carefully. We want to make sure that they are pedagogically appropriate. We want to make sure that the students are well informed if anything does change. And we'll continue to monitor this as we go on into the summer and make sure that if there's a need for the campus to make a broad change, that we will do so and make sure that that's well communicated.
Thanks, Tom. Transition to Chuck for two questions here for you. So Chancellor alluded to over the summer a transition back to campus. So the question is, as staff, are we being required to return to campus on August 1st? Can you talk a little about that transition over summer?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. So the answer is that we want the functions on campus that will support the return of faculty and students to campus in the fall to be fully operational by August 2nd. The degree to which that means that all staff need to return to campus will be determined by the division heads and the deans based on what is needed to make functions on campus work to support those students and faculty that are returning. So as an individual, that really will be up to the division and dean heads.
And as Chancellor noted, the May 12th Town Hall will spend a lot more time with details around that plan. So more to come on that for sure. Chuck, while you have your mic on, the next question is also for you. The question is, last year, many vacations were canceled due to the pandemic and was allowed for campuses to waive the vacation carryover limit. So will this carryover limit be waived again for the July 2021 transition again?
So in order to waive the carryover, we would require a regent resolution. And as of yet, we've not seen one of those. And the expectation of returning to normal operations as the vaccine continues to have its effect, I would recommend that anybody who's over go ahead and try and plan to use any of that overage. But again, region action would be required for that.
Thanks. Chancellor, this next question is for you. So you touched briefly in your remarks about vaccines. So the question is simply, why is UCCS considering requiring students and faculty to be vaccinated? I know you've had some conversations with the system leadership. Any insights you can provide there?
Sure. So these decisions are not taken lightly. So we've been consulting with state and local health departments, as well as University of Colorado scientists, medical experts, and COVID advisory committees and task forces on our campuses. So we believe the science around COVID vaccines is clear and compelling. If we move forward, as with our established vaccination policies, exemptions can be sought. So we're going to work those in as well if we go forward with this. So this decision will be good for public health, not only because it will lower rates of infection on our campuses, but also in the communities we call home. It'll also allow students, faculty, and staff to benefit from the on-campus experience that is critical to academic success and personal growth. So for all those reasons and more, this is being considered pretty seriously.
Thanks, Chancellor. Staying on the vaccine theme, Stephanie, question for you, I think. So it says, if a staff member has been fully vaccinated, will they continue to be required to wear masks at all times on campus? So I think it opens up the question, what does summer look like? And we can't plan what fall is going to look like, but any thoughts around what the future of protective measures look like?
Sure. So at this time, the campus will be continuing with masks through the end of the semester, so we can ensure everybody's safety. The good thing is once we reach herd immunity, we may see some of the public health guidance change, but until we reach that herd immunity, it's unlikely that we're going to see a lot of changes. The good thing is, though, if you're vaccinated and you are 2 weeks post your vaccination series being completed, you don't have to quarantine anymore. So there is a benefit from that angle. So we're encouraging everyone to take advantage of all these vaccine clinics because once we get to that point that we reach that herd immunity, it really helps us adjust some of those public health measures. But for now, we are still asking that everyone is wearing their mask while they're inside any buildings for sure.
Thanks. Well, that actually concludes our pre-submitted questions, so we get to dive into the live questions now. So we have a whole bunch coming in, so I encourage you to, if you have a question, continue to submit those. So the first one kind of is an HR question. So Chancellor, I'll start with you. Chuck may be able to weigh in on this one. So the question is, will the campus be conducting a review of pay equity for all employees? If so, when will that occur? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So HR has already done a lot of work on the implementing the Equal Pay Act. In fact, we created templates and memos to help the directors and supervisors as they hire new people. And this would be a pretty big project, and it's going to take some time. But our hope is at the end of the day, we want to ensure that everyone is paid fairly and equitably. And so that's where the process will be. So HR is working really hard to address it. In fact, some of the issues that are being addressed is if HR recognizes that somebody is being underpaid, right, rather than minimum wage, they're already bringing those to the notice of the cabinet members and the vice chancellors, and we're beginning to address a lot of those things. Now, when will the complete thing will happen is going to take some time, but we hope that we'll get there someday. Chuck, do you want to add anything to it?
Chancellor, I mean, all I would say is that one of the things that we are doing is we are trying to determine what timeline can be met. And again, it's a pretty heavy lift for HR. They had to work through all of the consultant submitted information, and they had to look at it through the lens of our campus. And that is taking some time. The most critical pieces, they have worked really hard over the last couple months to identify, and we are taking action on those. But there is a tiered set of reviews that we have to do, and those will take some time.
Thanks. All right, next question is for Carlos. So Carlos, the Chancellor mentioned in his comments the Future of Work Task Force that you're chairing. So the question is simply, how can faculty and staff best provide feedback to the Future of Work Task Force? And when you answer that, can you share just a little bit about kind of the things you guys are addressing and working on in that task force? Oh, you're on mute there, Carlos. Unmute.
Yes, my challenge, right? Thanks. I'll address the last part of the question first. So the Future Work Task Force began meeting last week, and the task force has representation from a broad areas of campus. This task force will be working on a long-term view, what the future work at UCCS would look like. Thus, the group will not be determining how we address this summer or even this fall. They will be taking into account what lessons that we've learned over this past year and what we might learn over the summer. We'll be looking at policies and what do we need to review, what we need to adjust. We'll investigate issues such as how do we continue to create a sense of community and belonging if part of our workforce could be working remotely. We'll also conduct research on what other universities have done and what other industries are doing to tackle these issues, and what the new work environment could look like, because we all know that it will not be exactly the same as it was before. And at the end, whether it's in the summer or early fall, we'll provide recommendations to the Chancellor's Cabinet on what we may want to do and how do we implement these things. On feedback, we have a variety of different people on the committee. There are, I think, 18 of us on the committee, and there are faculty, staff, and student representation on it. And so getting information through them, I think, would be good so that we can learn what the concerns are. We also had, I think, a faculty survey already conducted, and we're looking at the possibility of a staff and student survey. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that what we want to end up with is what is best for our campus community, what is best for our students, how is whatever we do going to enhance their learning opportunity, and how are we going to best work to provide that information for them? How do we do this in a way that makes them successful? So that'll be kind of the key approach to the Future Work Task Force. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks. Next question about vaccines, of course, the top story there. So Stephanie, this one's for you. So they started with the kudos from one fellow UCS Mountain Lion for the smooth vaccination clinic at the rec center. So great job to you and your team for pulling that off this week. So the question is, will UCCS continue to offer vaccines for faculty, staff, and student populations?
We will. They will be smaller scale, so thank you for the kudos. Yesterday was much smoother than the first one for anybody who attended, so we appreciate everybody coming. Most of our clinics now are accommodating 100 people at a time, and they're being run out of the Wellness Center simply because to pull off a pod of that size took about 100 volunteers, including our wonderful nursing students and staff from across the entire campus helping. So the rest will be run through the Wellness Center, but every single clinic from this point forward is open to every faculty, staff, and student at UCCS, so please take advantage. We will send out the links once a week. I've created next week's clinic already that will be coming out shortly. There is a clinic this afternoon that I have left open for people to register for still, and that information went out earlier in the week. So please take advantage of these, and then just always make sure the vaccine we're providing now is a 2-dose series. So you need to just be available about 28 days later. We will always have our second clinic 28 days later. If that doesn't work, we'll always try to accommodate you and fit you in somewhere else, as well as there's multiple community sites that are now doing same-day vaccinations. So please, wherever you get your vaccine is fine. Just make sure that you're going to move forward with getting that if you're interested in doing so.
All right. We're getting lots of questions. You guys all touched on the return to work this summer and return to campus. So we're getting lots of questions. People continue to ask about that. So Chuck, maybe you can kind of reiterate some of the points here. So the question for you is, will offices with both student and full-time university staff be able to fully open for in-person working this summer to provide in-person and virtual opportunities for students and families? So can you talk more about the summer transition that you alluded to a few minutes ago?
Sure. Yeah, I want to reiterate that the transition in the summer in preparation for fall is we have given the objective to the division heads and to the deans to have all of those support functions fully operational by August 2nd, which is 2 weeks before the faculty come back and 3 weeks before new students move in. A variety of offices on campuses are likely to accelerate some of those things because of what it takes to serve students. For example, financial aid is already talking about increasing their office hours on campus earlier in the summer because we know there are so many students that have questions about financial aid. And as they start coming to campus to check things out, that is a better place for them to interface. One of the things we also learned, though, is there are many students who like to take advantage of the ability to have a remote appointment and be able to engage with somebody through Teams or Zoom. And so we will continue to offer those opportunities as well. And so it really is going to depend on the functional area and what it takes for them to be able to serve students.
Thanks, Chuck. Chancellor, I think this one's for you. You touched on it briefly in your remarks. The question is, will a return to campus plan for the fall be completed and shared? If so, when can it be expected? You mentioned the May 12th town hall in your remarks there for more information. So.
Well, we hope that we'll be able to get that out no later than early next week or even late this week. I think we're just kind of making sure that the guidelines are not very restrictive, but they're really guidelines, not requirements, because I think our faculty and staff have done an amazing job over the last year in terms of how they really performed at a very high level, whether they came to campus or whether they're remote. So we're going to keep that in mind as we roll this out. But please know that the guidelines that we're going to put out will only be effective for fall 2021. So because we want to learn a lot as we prepare for the future. I'll also ask our provost to share his thoughts beyond what I just shared.
Not too much to add to that. We are going to be using the fall semester as a chance to learn more about what our opportunities are. We've discovered over this last year that we can do more remotely. We can make good use of technology. It impacts the way we teach. It impacts the way we work. And so fall, as we bring more on-campus presence back to this campus, we'll also be exploring how we can balance remote work with a larger on-campus presence. So that'll be the goal. Is fall will still be an experiment to us, and I can say, just from a teaching perspective, I'm looking forward to getting back into the classroom, and both of my classes are scheduled to be on campus, so that I'll be part of that experiment as well.
So, Chris, I just want to say, I'm eager to get back to campus and see all of you. So I think there is this thing, this sense of belonging that I said in my remarks, I think is so true. People are, it's been a real experience to just meet people live. So I know that a lot of people want to return to campus, and I think our culture of the campus will be impacted. So we need to think about how we thoughtfully go through this process as we make these guidelines.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. Question for Stephanie. So the question is simply, if everybody in a unit is fully vaccinated, can the people in that office space work without wearing face coverings? So what's kind of the latest guidelines that you're hearing on face coverings once you've been vaccinated?
So for the campus, it's still in place that everybody's wearing face coverings. So we will continue to abide by that through the end of the semester. Now, whether or not that will change after the semester, that guidance will likely come from the state and the county health departments and their philosophies around whether or not it's acceptable to do that. If people are in a private setting, if they're in their home and they're with vaccinated people that are 2 weeks post-vaccination in a small group, there's different guidance around that from the CDC without having to wear face coverings. But in a work setting at this time, through the end of the semester, people will need to continue to wear their face coverings.
Stephanie, while you have the virtual podium here, another question for you. The question is, what vaccines are your team offering, and are you open to receiving any vaccine type? So the Moderna versus Johnson & Johnson.
So we had attempted to order Janssen a few times. Our requests were denied. So it just was available again this week. So it's an option for us to order. We have only been doing Moderna because Pfizer requires a special type of freezer that we did not have readily available to have on campus. So that's why we've opted to go with the Moderna. So at this time, we are going to continue with the Moderna, but we are open to looking at the Janssen vaccine with future orders. We have had much better luck with Moderna orders. Those always come, and Janssen weren't. So we went with what option we could get every week, because I submit an order every week and it gets approved or denied. And so we're going with our best odds at this time to make sure we can provide vaccines.
Great, thanks. Next question, I think, is a split between Carlos and Tom. So the question is, when will the UCCS campus welcome guests, including for clubs back on campus for Carlos, and then for Tom, guest speakers for classes? So Carlos, you will start with when can we have folks come back for our clubs and activities?
Sure. We're keeping with our current practices to the end of the semester, as you mentioned. We'll reevaluate that, again, depending on what the health guidelines are. But to the end of the semester, we will continue with what we've been doing this semester. I hope that in the fall, though, that we will be able to be less restrictive and offer more and more in-person opportunities for our students, activities, events that have a larger audience. But again, it all depends on what the health guidelines will be at that time.
Tom, you want to talk about the guest speakers and classes?
Sure, be glad to talk about that, because that certainly again is something that we anticipate will be opening up for summer and for fall. Even right now, if a person, if there is an academic need to have a guest speaker, approval can be obtained for that speaker to come into that class. Now, again, remember, many of our classes this semester are still remote, so there's never been a restriction on having a remote speaker come into your class.
Yeah, and Chris, currently there are options for exemptions for certain events, so we would still continue that through the end of the semester.
Carlos, we'll stay with you. We've got a few more questions. Our questions are actually winding down as our time is winding down, which is working out well. So Carlos, question for you is, staff are commenting they're seeing students becoming less motivated to participate in virtual events. What can the campus do to get students excited to participate in more in-person activities in the future? So things your department's doing.
Okay. Well, we've actually had some fairly good success on remote events. And we've had some in-person events as well. So we have had students participate in that. As I said, for the fall, once students are more on campus, they'll feel a greater sense of a community on the campus. They'll be more involved. They'll want to be more involved. So we really think that's going to change from what we may have seen this spring to what we could be seeing in the fall. I think it's just going to be a more exciting place to be at. And students will definitely recognize that. Our residential population will also recognize that. We expect to have a fairly large group living in housing this fall. And again, it all depends on what the health guidelines are at the time. But right now, we are seeing students sign up for fall housing at a greater rate than what we had anticipated. So I think that's all good news.
That's great. Well, our last question for the town hall, just because our questions are drying up and also getting towards the bottom of the hour here. So we couldn't have a UCCS town hall without talking about parking. So Chuck, the last question will be for you. Will there be an option for varied parking passes for faculty and staff who are only working a day or two per week on campus?
So first of all, there are already, I believe, about 14 different types of permits that can be purchased. And it is the case that Carlos's task force will be looking at what type of parking permits would be needed in this future of work environment. So I think there's a consideration that is in work on that right now, and there are a lot of options that are already available.
Very good. Okay, we'll keep an eye on the task force and check out that parking portal there. So, okay. Well, that gets us towards the end of our time together. So I want to thank the panel for answering everybody's questions, and I appreciate everyone for submitting the questions. So before we turn everyone loose, I want to turn it back over to Chancellor Reddy to share some closing remarks. So Chancellor, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Before I start my closing remarks, I do want to say about inviting guests to classes. I want to remind everyone, our IT folks have done a great job putting technology into many classrooms. So many of the classrooms are HyFlex now. That means we could bring guests from anywhere in the world into the classroom without actually bring them physically. So they could participate in on-campus classes as well as online classes through this technology that we have. So I feel like we'll be well served in terms of bringing guests to the campus. Well, in terms of closing, change is on the horizon, so we can finally see a return to some of the activities that bring us joy, traveling, seeing friends and family, and spending time together in person. I know this will be a time of great change for all of us. It'll require flexibility, optimism, and plenty of patience. But we have proven as a community that we have the resilience to make it through any challenge we face. So I know we'll be just fine. Please keep an eye out for updates on the progress of the Return to Campus Task Force. That'll be exciting to see what they're going to come up with. Please also remember to practice compassion with those around you, and especially with yourself. I do want to add on that the EDA Task Force under Dr. Stephanie Rose Paulding has put out a request for grants, and they received 51 applications. So I think I'm looking forward to what the requests are, and this will continue to help us move our EDA efforts forward. So let me close with the words of Cesar Chavez that surely apply to the pandemic today. He said, "We draw our strength from the very despair in which we have been forced to live, and we shall endure." So thank you and have a great week.